I'm so excited as today I'm going to show you how to make an at-home version of my very favorite soup of all time, Vietnamese pho, and I'm making mine with steak today. This is the national dish of Vietnam and has some of my absolute very favorite flavors, and I'm going to show you how to make a quick at-home version. It's easy, it's inexpensive, it's super flavorful. So we're almost ready to eat. Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. It's a big day in my house. I am making my very favorite soup. The signature of pho is the broth. The broth gets its flavor from a really long cook with a whole bunch of aromatics and herbs and spices. And while we're doing a good approximation of the at-home quick cooking version today, there's no substitute for that long cook Vietnamese pho broth. But if Vietnamese cuisine is not something that's as common for you in your city as it is for me in Seattle, it's nice to have this quick cooking, cheap, easy version in your arsenal. So this recipe is actually pretty approachable. The most difficult and expensive part is the spices that you'll need. Today I'm using cloves, coriander, star anise, cardamom, and cinnamon. I'm gonna add some hoisin sauce and fish sauce to finish the broth that's been simmering on my stove for about 30 minutes. And then a whole bunch of vegetables here. I've just got some of my old standbys that I really love in pho. So a word about the broth. Even if you're making a quick cooking version, there are multiple opportunities to layer in flavor. So what I've done is charred some ginger and about a half of an onion at a high heat over my stove. I pulled that out and then added my spices, toasted those in the same oil, and then I combined it all together with an incredibly flavorful beef stock that I made earlier this week. I'll link that up here for you in case you want to learn how to make beef stock at home, but you really can use the boxed stuff as well, especially since you're adding so much flavor. I combined all of that together and I let it simmer on my stove for about a half an hour. There really is no risk of letting this broth simmer for too long. While it's quick cooking and you get some flavor within just like 30 minutes, the longer you let it simmer, the more flavorful your broth will be. So while for me this is coming together total in about an hour, and most of that time is my stove simmering the broth, you can stretch this out a little bit longer if you've got more time, and you'll end up with a more flavorful broth. The method here is really easy. We pre-cooked some rice noodles, which I have here just draining in a colander, waiting for me. They're cold at this point. The noodles I cooked according to the instructions on the package, and these are pho noodles, rice noodles as well. They say bon pho on them. And the instructions on the package just say to put them in boiling water for 6 to 8 minutes until they are your desired level of doneness, and then run them under cold water to stop the cooking process. So we've done that. We're gonna heat them back up with our broth. I've prepped my vegetable toppings. I blanched some broccoli, and then on the bench I have bean sprouts, red and green hot peppers, raw onion, Thai basil, cilantro, some limes, and some green onions. Don't bother substituting regular basil. If you can't find Thai basil, just leave it out completely. They're two pretty different flavors, and while I'm not a purist for most things, I can't imagine putting regular basil in pho. So the method here, cook the noodles, prep the mix-ins, prepare the broth. We're just gonna put it all together. The one thing that I have to do is cut my steak. You can use already cooked chicken, you can use tofu, you can just do a vegetable broth, but one of my favorite things is rare beef. So I'm gonna cut this beef that's currently in my freezer as thinly as possible and use the hot broth to cook the beef directly in my bowl. I'll show you what I mean. Let's get that beef going. So I have a little bit of flank steak here, and I've put it in my freezer. You really only want to freeze it for about 30 minutes. Mine might have been in there for a little bit longer. The goal is to freeze it a little bit so that it's easier to cut. And when you cut it, you can cut it into really super thin pieces. So I'm actually just gonna cut this in half and then start to cut this steak as thinly as I can. Now you don't want to take it too far, meaning if it's fully frozen through, it'll be really hard to cut your meat. But as you can see, if this weren't a little bit cold, I wouldn't be able to get such really super thin pieces of the steak. So that's about enough meat for me for one serving. So I give my hands a quick wash, and I've got my super flavorful broth over here. Use my colander setup to strain this broth. You don't want those aromatics in your final soup. So, okay, so we've got flavorful broth. This is about 2 servings worth, so I use 2 quarts of beef broth. Broth is ready. I really wish you could smell this. It smells absolutely unbelievable. Okay, so again, I've got about 2 servings of noodles here, so we're gonna start off and just make 1 bowl. So I'm gonna take some of the rice noodles, put them in the bottom of the bowl, layer the steak on top. Our broth was just boiling on the stove, so it's still very hot. The hot broth is what's gonna cook our steak. So the broth is almost ready to go in cooking our steak, but I wanna add first just a couple tablespoons of brown sugar, and then a little bit of fish sauce as well. You can omit this if you like, but fish sauce is a nice, salty, briny flavor in the background of the broth. I do that off the heat after it's completely cooked because I want to retain some of the flavor of both the sugar and the fish sauce. It's just a nice finisher for the broth. Hot broth now is going to go right over our noodles and our meat. So the meat and the noodles have been in the hot broth just for a couple minutes, and the meat is already cooked to my liking. So I like it a little bit pink. The outside is pretty done. You'll find in Vietnamese restaurants, or actually in Vietnam, the meat, even if you order takeout, comes to you raw. And the intent is for the broth to cook it, both to infuse flavor into it, but not to overcook the meat so that it gets tough. Since we're using flank steak, it's really helpful to cut it really, really thin so that it's not tough at all. So we're almost ready to eat. The next step is just to add my mix-ins. So broccoli, I'm gonna add a couple pieces of blanched broccoli. This soup is not hot enough actually to cook the broccoli, so I'd recommend blanching it a little bit before you add it to your soup. So traditionally in a Vietnamese restaurant or in Vietnam, they'll bring you a plate like this, and you really just add whatever you want and as much as you want to your own individual soup. So they'll bring you some Thai basil. I like a lot of Thai basil in mine. Just tear it right in. I like a little bit of cilantro, again, just torn right in. A couple red hot peppers, a couple jalapeno peppers, some scallions, and some lime. The real beauty of this soup is in the stock. I think that pho is meant really to be a celebration of the broth. And so I really focus a lot on making as flavorful a broth as I can in the quick time that I have, and then adding just really fresh, delicious ingredients that complement that broth. So if there's something on the plate here that you don't like, oh, I forgot onion. If there's something on my plate that you don't like, leave it out. If you're not a cilantro fan, leave it out. If you don't like spicy things, leave that out. If you want additional veggies or a different protein, I would highly recommend it. You can customize this to your taste. So I would spend most of your time on trying to make a delicious broth, and then whatever follows is just icing on the cake. Probably several different spices on the table, but the ones that seem the most common to me are hoisin and some sort of spicy sauce. I'm just going for some hoisin today. And we are ready to taste. So that combination of flavors is just truly so delicious. So good. Get some of the noodles. Of course, I wish for you that you have delicious pho in your town or city. But if you can't find it and you want to give pho a try in your own kitchen, this is a great place to start. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Please let me know in the comments below what your favorite soup is. And if you've tried pho or other Vietnamese cuisine, it's some of my favorite. I would highly recommend it. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe to my channel. And I really look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers.